Okay, so here are the rails, and here is our show.
Completely off, completely gone today. What in the world? Derailed. Yay, you're here. Welcome to the CK and GK podcast. Let's get going. How's
Hello.
it going, everybody?
Welcome back. It's Top Knot
So,
Talk.
yeah, it's so nice to be back and having another episode of Top Knot Talk recording. It's been, like 2 weeks since we've been able to record at this point? So
Right,
it's really
right.
nice. It's
Too
really nice to be
long.
back. Too long. This is good for both Jenny and I think. So it's been an interesting 2 weeks, but we're happy to be back here and recording for you guys.
Today we are going to cover fantasy sports. Get excited for that because all I can do is hear Mariah Carey sing in my head.
Sweet, sweet fantasy. That's amazing. I love her. Oh my God, I love her so much. She's like who I used to sing to when I was a kid all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, she's so
Of
good.
course.
Well, across from me on the screen, I have Scranton, Pennsylvania's favorite Valley girl. It's Kelly Kapoor, ready to go here and
Oh my
listening.
gosh, so good.
Isn't that like not a great description of her? She's totally a Valley girl, right?
Right.
Oh my goodness. Hi, Johnny.
We have Caitlin, who, even though she can't move her eyebrows, they are still on fleek.
Oh man. Okay, I don't know if I told you this. I went into my dermatologist office where I go get my beautiful, beautiful Botox, and I got it in my jawline because I have TMJ, and Botox for TMJ is supposed to be really helpful. Like
Oh,
because the muscles are constantly like
right. It makes it
tightened,
so you're
so it
not
makes it so
always,
you
yeah.
can't clench them. So I went in and she's like, okay, let's check your face. Give me your face. She's like, get angry for me. And I can't can't get my eyebrows to come together. So I can't make angry face. Like I can't scrunch up, which is fine. I don't care. I don't want to be able to make that face. But then she goes, okay, now lift your eyebrows. And I could, and she goes, I think we need to use the stronger stuff on you next time. So I am gonna have like, I guess it's called dye
Oh,
sport or whatever.
no.
So they're gonna use the stronger stuff because I am like my eyebrows are stronger than the Botox, and it's only lasting me like 2 months instead of 3. So
Oh my gosh.
we're gonna give probably do Botox where the 11s are, and then do the stronger stuff on my forehead because my forehead is defying the Botox.
Wow. That is also funny. And also, like, if your face muscles are that strong, think about like how strong your biceps must be.
I mean, this is like, they're pretty
See?
okay. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
not bad. I'm flexing in the mirror. We were teaching Sam, he's learned that he has bumps, which are his muscles. And we're teaching him, hey, is there a vet around here? Because these pythons are sick, and like making him flex.
Wow.
Or I told him, can you help me find my beach ball? It's about this big, and like making him like flex his muscles in funny ways. So that's been really fun. But yeah, I think my face muscles must be really strong because I need Botox to like chill my jaw out, and my forehead is overpowering the Botox that I have. So clearly, don't mess with me because I can make really good faces at you.
Right.
We are going to go right into sports talk. We've got a few things going on. Actually, maybe we should kind of rearrange a little bit since since our theme for the day is sports. Should we maybe like do a little bit
Right.
of rearranging? So I'll just tell you Sam's newest ridiculous thing. Are we ready for this?
Yes.
In Texas, it's like so hot pretty much through September and like well into October. Like you can
Right.
get like 90s, well into October here. But
When
I've
we were
noticed.
growing up, it was always Columbus Day, Indigenous Peoples Day weekend when my mom would open the windows for the first time.
Yeah, and you can kind of feel like a seasonal sort of shift. Like I know it happens in the spring when it's no longer springtime anymore and it's summer. There's like a very real something with the lighting here where it just shifts and you know that the season has changed. And with like September coming and kind of winding like towards the middle and end, you'll notice that the mornings feel different.
Right.
And so it's been cooler in the mornings, like instead of, 78 and super humid, it's been like 68 and much cooler and much more comfortable. And we went out earlier this week to take my son to school, and he goes, "It smells like Halloween out here." Because he's
Oh,
here, like, he feels the cooler weather, and
yeah.
so my child is officially obsessed with fall. We know that's his season. We went over to Central Market and picked out some, like, little pumpkins, and he, like, has them in his bed. He's so obsessed, and all he can think about is Halloween and fall time. So, it's been very funny, but then the weirdest part about it is him just, like, randomly telling strangers that it smells like Halloween. And so, like, without any context, people are like, Yeah," like, they don't
But
get
if
it.
they are Gilmore fans,
Oh, yeah,
there's
they
the
would
scene
get
where
that.
Lorelai goes, "Smells like snow."
Yeah, I well, that's very true. In Colorado, there's a very distinct snow smell in Denver. It smells like Greeley, which Greeley, Colorado is where there's quite a few cattle ranches and farms, and it's a
Oh,
distinct smelly cow bad
mm.
waste smell. So like you can go smells like snow in Denver, but like in Texas you don't get that kind of thing. So
No,
it
no,
was
no.
very cute, but it was like I'm kind of mortified that my child is walking around telling random strangers that it smells like Halloween when they're like,
But
sure."
we know that Sam loves Halloween because isn't he the one who had the pet skeleton?
Yeah, he actually last year I bought these like foot-long skeleton things. One of them has a jack-o'-lantern for a head and it's orange, and the other one is just a plain skeleton, and they were meant to be like door decorations. But he
Right, right,
walked
right.
around with it like it was a lovey.
But the
And
head,
the head,
right.
I think I
Yeah.
showed you, like, yeah, there was a moment last year where he put it in front of the baby monitor, and so he turned on the baby monitor, it was just, like, this terrifying, like Ichabod Crane sort of, like, Headless Horseman situation where my child has this, like, creepy jack-o'-lantern in this camera, and it was, like, I turned it on, and I think I screamed audibly and then just couldn't stop laughing. It was my child, it has an obsession. So I guess that would be my other obsession is just how much he is obsessed with fall. He loves it, but I'm like, it's kind of one of those things where you're walking around and you're like, you don't have to talk to every single person on the street. It's lovely that you're friendly,
Right.
but also she doesn't care that you think it smells like
Smells like
Halloween.
Halloween.
Just
But
like
you know
I don't
what?
care about your shows, whatever.
But good for you to teach your kid that.
He's very friendly.
Otherwise, they well, being friendly is okay, but being, socially aware and understanding that you just told someone a story and they didn't care about it. Let me tell you about their body language and how you can recognize that someone's not interested.
Yeah, did you see how she made kind of a face where her nose sort of turned up and she's like, "Okay, that means that she doesn't care." Like, whatever. So
Learn
we're
this
working on
now
we're
so that you're not
it
the
will save
adult
you a
who
lot of pain
continues to tell
later.
the story at the table when no one is interested.
It will save you so much pain later on if you can just go, no one's interested. Cool, good talk,"
It will
and then wrap
also
it up.
help your future spouse that they don't have to sit there and kick you under the table to tell you, "Hey, no one cares."
Speaking of topics no one cares about, is all
Fantasy
fantasy
sports,
football.
right? This is what I'm thinking. Like, we have woven this together on accident, but truly, something no one cares about, your fantasy sports team.
Before we get into fantasy, I do want to give a quick sports update because here's what's going on this weekend. We're recording on a Saturday. At this point, we've taken to just recording whenever we can, right? So Saturday
Right.
is big college football day for people who love college football. So a couple of games that are going on this weekend. I took this information from the Gist. If you are even moderately interested in understanding what's going on in the world of sports, I highly recommend following the Gist and getting their newsletter sent to your inbox. It's really awesome. But this
This is
is,
only like the 20th time that we've mentioned them on the podcast.
I
So
know,
if you are a fan, if you are a loyal listener, you know that you should already be following the gist
Right, they also have their own podcast, like, totally worth a listen, but
after ours.
yeah, ours takes at least like and subscribe, and then you can go
Yeah,
listen to the gist.
download ours and then go ahead and listen to the gist.
Right. So so this week, the two probably biggest games people are going to be talking about are number 1 ranked Alabama and number 11 ranked Florida. So these two played each other in the 2020 SEC championship, and Alabama won, and I think it was 52-46. So you can probably assume that Florida is going to be ready to try and do some work, do some damage on the Crimson Tide. But, you know, Alabama is number 1 across the nation. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, I've told you before, it's because of Nick Saban.
Yes.
He made a deal with the devil.
In order to be like the winningest.
Right.
The other game that's a big deal this weekend is Penn State. Penn State is doing their yearly whiteout. It's called the Penn State Whiteout, and everyone in the stadium wears all white. So it looks kind of like eerie, spooky, creepy, but it's actually really awesome because the whole stadium is wearing at least white t-shirts. And then the team also wears white. And they're playing Auburn.
We did that at A&M.
Yeah, we did it too. We do
Yeah,
whiteout
it
and we
was
do
maroon
blackouts.
out.
Oh, maroon out. Okay.
Maroon out, and we had a run for a while where we had never lost a maroon out game.
Who did you lose the maroon out game to? The one.
I don't remember who we lost to the first time. It might have been Texas,
Eh.
but we played OU
Mm.
and knocked them out of the national championship.
Woot woot. I'm
It's
down with
one of
that.
my top sports memories of all time.
That's
It was
really
the
cool.
coolest deal. And there was one year that I was there that the maroon out t-shirts said, "Don't be the guy in the white shirt."
I like that. Yeah, you got to make sure that you're the one who's like not ruining it, right? And
Right.
I'm pretty sure that they made it so that like you either get a shirt or what, it doesn't matter, but you're supposed to,
Right.
everyone knows that you're supposed to wear the white shirt. So CU, my alma mater, does the blackout, which is also very cool looking. Like the team is all in their entire black uniform, the helmets are black, and with like the gold accents, it looks really cool. So it's a fun game. The expectation is that Penn State has a defense that will probably not allow Auburn to do much. So we'll see how that goes, but I would imagine that Auburn loses that game. So again, my predictions based on my information from the gist and what I know about the teams, I'm going to go ahead and predict Alabama wins and Penn State wins those two games. Hopefully that's enough information for you to make it through this weekend in terms of college sports. But Jenny's going to give us some updates and some real deal information on how to understand when your fantasy football loving partner, whoever that may be, is talking about things that you just don't understand, therefore also don't care about.
Right.
But and this is personal to Jenny and I because Jenny and I are hearing these things all the time because our husbands are like co-running two fantasy football teams right now. So both of them are constantly checking their phone, especially on Sunday, like constantly checking on phones and all this stuff, just looking at how their teams are doing. And I have to, look over at him and he's like, oh man, oh. And or like, no, get through. And you're just like, what are you talking about? Oh, it's fantasy. Great.
So I have to start by saying, sorry, not sorry, I don't have notes. Normally,
We're very
when we
prepared.
normally when we plan an episode, there is a logical flow to what we're saying. You can't notice it from listening, but we actually do plan.
We plan. It's like we do a little lesson plan. No?
Right.
Yes? Yeah. I would say so
Which, if you are a student in my class, you know that the lesson plan means nothing,
anyway.
because if you ask me a question about anything I'm interested in, I can just talk about that for the rest of the period.
Pretty much.
We knew that if we asked Mr. Kraft, my 8th grade geometry teacher or 9th grade geometry teacher, if we asked him anything about Texas A&M or airplanes, we would have enough time to finish our homework before he finished the story.
Finish your homework. I like it.
Right.
That's amazing. Why airplanes?
He was really interested in jet engines. We would just, on the way to class, say, hey, can you ask Mr. Kraft something about propellers? And everybody knew what that meant. This is the same teacher that spent the entire semester not focusing his overhead, and I was so
Ugh.
mad. I thought, "What a jerk, you don't focus your overhead." Then I realized I just needed glasses, and
Oh.
he ended up focusing it the whole time.
Mom, he never focuses it. He's like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah, well, and it was the only class that had an overhead projector that semester for me, so it was the only one I couldn't see the board. All the other ones I could see just fine. No, I just needed glasses.
Oh, man, did he do the thing were his hands, like, covered in overhead marker?
Oh
Remember
my
that?
gosh, like, all the way down his
Way
forearm.
down, yeah, all the way down.
Anyhow, back to fantasy sports. I think in order to truly understand fantasy sports, you have to know that it's okay not to care.
Fair point.
So, when I met my partner, I was 29 years old, and we met in the late summer and started dating almost immediately
Okay.
and became very serious very fast. He was living in a town that was 3 hours away. So it was kind of like a speed limit on our relationship that we did not see each other every day, but we did talk a lot, which kind of got us to get to know each other really well.
Sure.
And because I did not want him to meet Abigail until I knew that we were going to be committed and he was going to be a part of her life for an extended amount of time, I was like, I don't need a ring in order for you to meet her, but we need to be serious.
Yeah.
We saw each other only every other weekend.
Okay.
And so we would jam pack that weekend with time together. So as we're going through the fall, we decided that we would start attending a church together. And on Sundays, we would be sitting in the auditorium at this church, and he would have his phone out constantly because at that point, he was managing 7 fantasy football teams.
That's too much. That's too much.
7.
Oy.
And at that point, I said, okay, well, if you're going to do 7 of these teams, I need to learn something about fantasy football. And this is when I first learned about it. Now, you may be much younger than 29, or maybe you are much older, and maybe you have tons of fantasy knowledge and you play in a league with your family or friends, and maybe you know nothing about it. So I'm going to give you the very basics.
Okay.
The idea behind fantasy football, the fantasy part is you are building a team of your favorite players, the ones that have the most excitement for you. And that might be because they have the highest statistics. It might be because they're your favorites. It might be because you know that you're going to earn the most amount of points on a Sunday by how they perform.
And there's also this fantasy aspect of these players may or may not actually play together on a team in the
Right.
NFL. So you get to,
Build your
yeah, you're pulling from all these
fantasy
different
team.
teams and come like this is your, if you were building your ideal football team, these would be
Who
the
would you put
players
on
that
it?
you would choose on them. Now, it gets a little bit more complicated than that because you don't just get to like say, well, I
You
want,
don't get to pick your favorite player every time
right,
because you are playing in a league that has anywhere from 6 to about 12 teams.
right.
And sometimes you are playing against people that you know, and sometimes you are playing against people that you don't know. Most people who play fantasy football know the other people in their league, even if they only know them through the league,
Mm.
because the other part of fantasy football, besides building your team and playing for points, which we'll talk about in a little bit, is also a lot of smack talking on the internet
Oh my gosh.
because there are games on Thursday and Sunday and Monday.
Oy.
And so Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday, in order to get your fantasy fix, you must be making trades and talking smack to the other people in your league about how their team is performing or not performing.
Right, and the smack talking starts as early as, like, as soon as you make the title of your team. Like, I've seen fantasy football team names that are like, "Joey smells like a butt." Like, it's the
Right.
stupidest, most ridiculous thing right now that
It is very sophomoric behavior.
Right, right, for the most part. I have yet to see a very mature fantasy football league come together.
No, it wouldn't be fun.
Right. Yeah, that's part of the fun.
So when you are playing in this league with anywhere between 6 and 12 teams, every player in real football can only be on one fantasy team in your league.
Right.
So there is a draft process This is the exciting time of the
Oh
fantasy
my
football season.
gosh.
Many fantasy leagues have the ability to draft in person.
Yeah.
Now, with COVID, things are a little different, but a lot of them, all 6 to 12 team managers, will get together and have a little party and pick their
And by
players.
team manager, you mean like dudes who are just in this league together. Like that's all you're saying.
Right. And I am very intentional with the word manager because until 2018, fantasy teams were owned.
Okay.
The language switched when we realized just how insensitive it is for someone to,
Say that
quote,
they own a
own
person.
a team,
Yeah.
own a person.
Yeah. It's
Right.
not cool.
So now you are team
Yep.
managers. And in the case of Caitlin's husband and my husband, they are co managers on a couple of different leagues. Don't worry, my husband is still managing some other teams on his
Yeah,
own
mine still
because
has his own
he
also.
wouldn't be happy with only two teams for a season.
And okay, so explain how the draft process worked for the teams that they're on because the draft process varies by who's the host of the league. So like depending on which, company is hosting the leagues, you can have different processes. Like for example, the one that Bryce is in outside of our husband's co-managing, it was auction style. So each person who's in the league had a certain amount of money to spend, fake money, and you were bidding on players that you wanted to play on your team. So for example, if you were dead set on having Tom Brady as your quarterback, you might, if you had $100, you might offer up 50 right away, and then you might say, okay, I only have 50 left for the rest of it. But it's also possible that you could be outbid. Someone could bid 51 and then that person gets your person. I don't know who happens to be on my husband's team. Like I have no idea, but I know that like there were a couple of guys who dropped a third to a half of their money to get one particular player. And then
Right.
you could end up like buying the rest of your players for a buck each. I don't know how it works, but I know that auction style is
One.
one of the ways that you can draft people. So what did the boys do for their teams that they're co-managing?
Well, there's a snake draft
Okay.
where you count, I'm the first person, the second person, the third person. If you are the last to draft, you are also the first to draft in the next round. So it kind of snakes back and forth.
Oh yeah, okay, that makes sense.
The league that they co-manage together, if I remember correctly, is traditional in that you are either first, second, blah, 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 blah. And then from that, they can trade their turns.
Position. Yeah, you trade positions.
So we can
Yeah.
say, look, I have the third pick in the first round. I will trade that for so and so player.
Mhm.
And so that's one style. And that's like PE dodgeball, right?
Yeah.
That's like I'm choosing this person for my team. Okay, it's now your turn to pick.
That's also really similar to regular draft
Right.
scenarios where you're actually, in real time watching players be drafted to various NFL teams. And sometimes players, they'll be chosen and the other teams are like kind of scrambling or say, this team gets this pick and this pick in the draft or whatever. So that seems pretty in line with other things that I've seen in the past.
Right. Then I don't know if it's a league that they play in together or it's just a different one. John was in one where they had to pick what number they wanted to be in the draft.
That's interesting.
And so they picked what number they wanted to be and then from there went through and drafted.
Okay.
But I thought it was really interesting that you went Tom Brady as an example for someone that you would spend a ton of cash on.
Okay.
Because let's pivot from drafting to how you earn points.
Okay.
So in fantasy football, the defense works as one point scoring entity.
Right.
So rather than picking a bunch of defensive players, you actually put on your team the entire defense from one team.
Right, so you're gonna draft, like, the Tampa Bay
Right.
defense.
I'm going to take the Bucks defense. I'm going to take the 49ers defense. Normally, defenses are chosen towards the end of a draft because it's not as hot a topic, right? Like people are not fighting over the defenses normally.
Right.
But something that they are fighting over are running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends because the way that you are making the most points in fantasy football are great catches and touchdowns.
Mhm.
So, yes, picking a quarterback is important, but it normally doesn't happen first. Normally, who you see go in the first couple of rounds, again, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends.
Okay, we're going to have an explanation of what those position players actually are and do at some point. For now, just know that those players are typically the ones that are going to be receiving a ball at some point and attempting to score. It
Right.
will likely not be the quarterback who is making the score. They will just be facilitating the manner in which the ball goes towards the end zone.
Right. In real football, you play offense, defense, or you're on the special teams.
Mhm.
The offense are responsible most of the time for scoring,
Right.
right? When your team possesses the ball, you are on offense.
Right.
Defense, most of the time, their job is to keep the other team from scoring when it's not their turn to hold the ball.
Right.
And then the special teams, again, most of the time, are responsible for kicking or scoring extra points after a touchdown has been made.
Right.
There are exceptions to every rule, and any football player who's listening to this podcast and says, no, 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 just
Screaming. They're
go with
screaming
me
right
on
now.
this. Go with me on this. I am explaining it like I would tell my 4-year-old, right? Most of the time, offense tries to score.
Right.
Most of the time, defense tries to keep the other team from scoring.
Right.
And most of the time, special teams are responsible for kicking related plays.
Yes.
Let's just go with that.
All the in between stuff.
Okay.
Perfect.
So, again, in fantasy sports, the way that your team will earn points on defense is just the entire defense for a team you've chosen will stop plays, or luckily if you're excited and things happen, maybe that defense is going to catch an interception or pick up an interception and run it in to score. Okay.
Yeah, you get points for scoring if you're on defense. You get points for stopping a big play or an important play, or pretty much every stop you get some kind. It's like a quarter of a point or something like that. And then there's other, if your defense sacks the quarterback or tackles the quarterback when he has the ball, that would be another way to earn points as a defense. But primarily, you're looking at their entire ability to work together is going to be how you build up some points. And it's not usually big points, but it does count for something. So it does matter to pick a decent defense.
Right. But the biggest scoring points are going to be when someone runs the ball in and scores a touchdown,
Right.
or when someone makes a fantastic catch.
Yes.
So, when we're talking about players that typically run the ball in or make a catch, those are going to be players on offense, particularly running backs, tight ends, or wide receivers.
Okay.
Okay, so we can talk about what each of those things mean on another one where we can break down the game. But today we're talking about fantasy and we're just talking about how to earn points. So, those are the players that go first in the draft. Those are the players that are fought over.
Yes.
And then at some point, we start to talk about quarterbacks. And sometimes fantasy managers choose the quarterback that they like the best. Sometimes they choose them for their ability to perform.
Yeah.
But again, when you're looking for big performers, it's normally those running backs, tight ends, and wide receivers.
Yes.
So if a fantasy manager is playing in only one league, they have one team that is made up of players from all the NFL teams in the league,
Mm-hmm.
which makes watching football very exciting
For that person.
because it doesn't matter, right, for that person. But it doesn't matter what teams are playing. They probably have a dog in the fight.
Right. Right.
Right? Because your fantasy team is made up of players from all over the league.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you happen to be in our family, we're Packer backers, right? So even if the Pack isn't playing, my husband has an interest in the game because he probably has a fantasy player or two playing at that time.
Right. And this is where the popularity of things like NFL Red Zone have come into play, because there's a lot of interest in having all of these different teams on your TV playing at one time because then you can kind of keep an eye on everything that's going on. So we have Red Zone on in our house on Sundays a lot of the time because my husband is watching every single play come through and try to earn as many points as he can.
Okay, I am smirking right now. I'm actually like waving my finger back and forth like no,
She's
no, no,
going,
no,
no,
no, no.
no, 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 no,
Okay.
no.
The NFL Red Zone channel, if you're not familiar, it's part of the Sunday Ticket.
Yes.
It costs
It's a special
It's a
paid
special
channel.
package
Yeah.
that you pay for the season, and the Red Zone channel is like a little extra
Yeah.
that flips between games anytime anything interesting happens in the game,
Yep.
if there's a great injury that you want to rewatch,
Oh,
or if the team is in what we call the red zone or the area close enough for them to score. Okay. So it shows you all of the big plays that are happening and you can see all of the games that are going on in that time window.
which is perfect for fantasy
Yeah, it's great
watchers
for
because they
fantasy.
only care about wanting to see who's scoring and all that.
It's
That's all
also
they care
great
about.
for football fans like me because the game never gets boring. What you're watching on on the Red Zone channel is all the highlights in real time.
Right.
So I
Exactly.
love the Red Zone channel. I think it's great. Okay, so just last week, my husband asked me, "Hey, do you still have your grad school email because we can qualify for a student discount for Sunday
For
Ticket?"
Red Zone?
I said,
Oh,
great. Yeah, let's do it. I have finished my master's degree, but I am still eligible for student opportunities because I haven't completed my internship. So technically, I'm still a student at this university.
okay. I see.
So I said to him, man, we should really share the login with Bryce because the Red Zone channel is so great.
Oh
And,
my
it's
gosh.
costing us $300 to
For
have
the season?
this season ticket.
Oh my
John
god.
then tells me, Caitlin, the reason I'm like, no, 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 no. John then tells me, oh, Bryce hates the Red Zone channel.
He does. Okay, so here's what's funny about this is he doesn't care for the announcer. He it's not that he hate I don't think it's that he
Oh.
hates the channel. I think he appreciates the real-time update information. I think he'd rather watch a solid game. I'll be honest about that. But I know he dislikes the announcer.
Okay. So he was like, oh, yeah, we don't need to tell Bryce about it. He hates the Red Zone channel. Well,
Oh.
so for you to say, oh, we always have this on, I was like, well, I was going to give it to y'all. And then John was like, no, 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 no. We're not giving it to them because Bryce doesn't like
Well.
it.
Oh, he's so busted. I don't want to like speak for my husband, but I know it's been on in our house and I know it's often on in our house on Sundays. I don't know if it's on this season. I haven't seen anything, but
That is
I
funny.
know that I know that the announcer is like his I think that just his mannerisms are not
Oh, sure. I get that.
I think that they're annoying, right? Like I think he just feels annoyed by him or
Okay.
whatever. But that's really funny. But in terms of if you are a fantasy watcher or a fantasy like player, whatever you're doing, Sunday Ticket and Red Zone are really good because all you're doing is seeing how you are earning points. There's no like you're not watching a full game. If you are a hardcore fan of one team, you might just only want that one team's game on and that's it. But, otherwise
Yeah.
otherwise maybe we'll have to steal that login from you guys. Oh, busted.
Yeah.
That's pretty
It
funny.
was I was laughing as you're telling me, "Oh yeah, we always watch." I'm like, well, you're about
No,
that."
it's I can tell you, yeah, I can tell you that it's been I mean, here's the thing. I wouldn't know about it if it weren't on in our house. I'm going to be real
Yeah.
about that. Like I would probably choose to watch one or two football games on Sundays and that's probably about it. Even then it's for me it's like background noise and when I turn and look at the television I'm like, "Oh, okay, the Broncos are losing." Like that's sort of my in-depth especially in this market, I don't even get to watch the Broncos all that often because I'm not in Denver. But with that said, I wouldn't know about Red Zone and I wouldn't know about Sunday Ticket unless it was on in our house.
Right.
So I know that it's been on at some point. This season, not sure,
Okay.
but for sure in the past.
Well.
Oops.
So the Red Zone, I like the Red Zone channel again, not even as a fantasy player. I don't have a fantasy team. I don't manage fantasy. I'm not involved in that at all.
Mm,
I just like that I'm
mm.
always watching exciting football. There's also no commercials, which is really nice.
Yeah.
The advantage to being a fantasy manager, again, is you always have a dog in the fight. You're always watching. The disadvantage is someone on your favorite team might score and you're mad.
Yeah,
because
because
again,
they're not
they're
on your
not on your
fantasy team.
fantasy team. So John and I will be watching a Packer game and he is cheering and kicking himself at the same time because the guy who just ran that ball in is on his buddy's team.
Right. And so I think this is where we need to stop for just a second and say there's also within the fantasy, each team manager will go up against another person in
Right.
the league every week. So you'll have a quote head to head matchup between your two teams. Joey smells like a butt, and, so does your mom, might still play each other. And so again, the goal is to earn as many points as possible with the people that you have on your team. And so you're paying during the week, all the guys are paying attention to who's injured that I need to remove and replace on my team because I won't earn points if an injured player isn't playing. Who's offering me a trade? This trade sucks. Oh, this trade's great. Okay, we're going to go ahead and do that. Who am I up against this week? So they're all paying attention to all of those things all week long. That's why fantasy is something that you hear the guys talking about, or your partner, whoever's into it, all week long, because they're dealing with all these other things on the side. And then when they're playing against each other over the weekend, when all the games are happening, you are going to see people who are like mad because their team is winning, but it wasn't because of the player who they have on their
Roster.
fantasy team.
Right. And that was a really great point that you brought up, that you do have that head-to-head matchup every week. Your points essentially reset to 0
Right.
each week
Right.
because you're just competing against that other fantasy manager's team. And so by the end of the season, you have a record
Right.
for how many games. Now, the end of the fantasy season is not the end of NFL season. And the reason that the fantasy season has to end before the NFL season is, like we said, it's head-to-head matchups and it ends with a playoff.
Right.
And the only way that your whole roster can appear in a playoff is if it's still during the normal NFL season. Because if your players are on an NFL team that gets knocked out of the playoffs, how are
Right.
you
You
going to
can't
earn
earn points
points?
anymore. Right.
Exactly. So you're going to see fantasy football end before the NFL playoffs begin. The last week of the NFL season is the last week of fantasy football.
It's my understanding that this week there are 18, or this season, there are 18 games instead of 17. Each team gets a bye week at some point. If you have a team that has a bye week, you are scrambling and trying to get players in who are not on their scheduled bye week so that you can make sure you still earn some points.
Right.
I think that some of the ways the leagues work is that you're looking at who has the best record to go into like fantasy playoffs. You also, if there's a record where there's a tie, they will look at
Total points
total
for the season.
accumulations. And so that could be a way that you get into the playoffs of your fantasy league.
Right. And each league has its own rules, right?
Right.
You can manage your league however you like. The person who's in charge of your league is called the commissioner. Sometimes it's a committee, sometimes it's, a couple of people. And there are also different websites that will host your league, and they have different rules as well.
Right.
So depending on if you're an ESPN league or a Yahoo league, et cetera, each one counts points differently. Each one has different rules. And this is when you can tune out your friend. Okay. When it gets down to that nitty gritty, here are the phrases that you want to say. Oh my goodness, what are you going to do about that? So does he
So
have a
what comes
plan for next week?
Right.
Well, if he's out, who are you going to replace him with?
Oh,
And
that's a good one.
because their rosters are pretty deep, right? They don't have hopefully they don't have just one running back on their team, because like Caitlin said, if you're on a bye or if your player's injured, you want to be able to fill that spot.
Right.
So some other phrases that I go to pretty often. Let me see.
I do. That sounds difficult. What comes next?
Oh, that's a
Like,
good
or
one.
that sounds frustrating. That sounds frustrating.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do now? Like, yeah,
What'd you do
that's
last
another one
season
of my.
about that? Is this going to affect your standings in the league?
Oh, that's a good one. I like that one. Or just like, what's your record
Yeah.
if they start talking?
Yeah.
You don't have to have, we're just giving you a list of potential questions that you can then tune out the answers
Yeah.
to.
You can also ask, is this the league you play in with such and such? Because then they're going to say,
Yeah.
no, Jen, This is the other one, and they're gonna pivot the conversation away from the stats, and you're not gonna
Right,
have
and
to
they're gonna
listen
turn it
to
about
see
the
they're
people.
gonna start to
Mhm.
talk about the people in the league, and at that point, you can start to listen again.
Right.
Or, if this is your bag and you're really into it, great. That's awesome. But the point of my lesson today is if you are partnered with someone who loves fantasy football, or if you are sitting at a table with people who are playing and talking about fantasy football, here's how to manage your way through the conversation. Now, I will tell you that for a while we had a roommate. She manages a fantasy football league. And when she was living with us, John really managed it for her. And she did fairly well. She didn't win her league, but she did fairly well.
She managed a league or a
Oh,
team? She was a
sorry, a
commissioner
team.
or she
No, sorry, she
oh.
managed a team in a 6 team league.
Oh, okay.
So 6
Okay.
teams means that you have a really great team because there's less people to fight over
Yeah,
the great
exactly.
players, right? So last season, she was not living with us. And John reached out to her and said, "Hey, do you still want me to help you with your draft? Can I help you with your team?" She was like, "Oh, yeah, that'd be great. Thank you so much." Well, this season, he sent her a note a couple weeks ago and said, "Hey, just so you know, like, I know you don't live with us. I know that it's been a couple years, but I'm still available if you need help."
Okay.
She texts him, I'm not even kidding you, 3 minutes before the draft. And she was like, "Hey, are you available to draft in 3 minutes?"
No.
Oh, he said yes, and he pulled out his phone and started drafting.
Stop. Oh my gosh,
He's
3
so
minutes
addicted to
notice?
fantasy
He's
sports.
really into it. Oh
He's
my
so
gosh.
addicted that he was like, "Oh yeah, in 3 minutes, no problem." He carries around a spreadsheet. It's like in his Google Drive so we can access it at any point.
But, like, how awkward is that to, like, be on your drive on your phone and then be and be drafting at the like, I can't I would need multiple screens. And you do see people with, like, 3 screens
Right,
set up during the draft, like, totally analyzing everything, and I'm like, "You guys, you know the word fantasy? That means it's make believe. We really don't
right.
need to be this." But there are people who there was a like documentary about like some teams that were super hardcore, or some leagues that were super hardcore where like guys were betting, tattoos at the end. Like the
Oh,
loser
yeah,
has
yeah,
to
yeah.
get a tattoo or I mean, I've seen it get really intense. Most of the leagues that I either have participated in myself or that I know people are participating in are just like for a pot of cash at the end.
My husband's in a league where you get like one of those Live Strong bracelets that's like fantasy champion. Yeah. So, I
I
mean,
get the bracelet.
right. There are legacy teams, dynasty teams, and a dynasty team, you get to keep some players
Right, but they continue year after year. So
year
you
after
have
year
to and so if you want to get out of a fantasy or I'm sorry, a dynasty or legacy league, you have to find someone to fill your
to take
spot.
your team. Right. There are keeper leagues. There are keeper leagues where you get to
Oh,
choose a few people from your team last year to keep and then go
that's
into
kinda
the
nice.
draft, and those players are not on the table. Some other vocabulary that you might want to know. I was laughing when you were saying about multiple screens. The first time that John was drafting for fantasy baseball when we were dating, I was pretty broke. Single mom, like trying to keep the house. And, there were things I could have not paid for. But I decided I really wanted to keep my house. And so I didn't move into a tiny apartment, which meant I still had a mortgage and insurance and all of those things. One of the things I got rid of was internet. I said, I have internet at school and I have a cell phone. I don't need internet at my house. So when he needed to draft, it was a weekend that he was coming to visit me. We went to Starbucks and he had multiple laptops opened at Starbucks so
Oh
that
my
he could have
gosh.
his MLB spreadsheets and then also his computer open to draft. So, I mean, the multiple screen things is real even if you don't have internet at your house. But I'm trying to think of other vocabulary that you might want to be familiar with. Keeper, dynasty, draft, we covered all of those things. The playoffs happen before NFL playoffs.
Yeah.
Your matchup is your game that week. Who are you playing against in the league?
To be clear, I want to make sure I have this right. Because there are games on Thursday, Sunday, and Monday, that means that you could start earning points as soon as the games begin on Thursday night
Correct.
and then continue to earn. If you have a player in a Thursday night game and in a Monday night game, you are earning points, and that matchup does not finish until the last game has
Until the
ended.
last game on Monday night.
Okay, got it.
Now, there's also predictions that are made,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
All fantasy football is like a multi-million dollar business. So there are websites and even sometimes tools in your hosting software that will predict how many points you're going to earn based on what players you have and how they've performed before.
Yeah.
And so you might go into the Monday night game. And remember, Monday Night Football is the last game of the football week.
Right.
And there are only 2 teams that play on Monday night.
Right.
So you might go into the Monday night game predicted to win or predicted to lose. And your whole week, your whole team's performance is based on how that Monday night game is going to go.
And alternatively, you could be done on Sunday and not be able to earn any more points while your teammate has, a defense in the Monday night game, and then you could end up losing. So it
Yeah.
just, you can see frustration over fantasy all weekend long. That's what I mean to say by that. Fantasy, it doesn't stop just because their teams are done, because there could be someone else's team that's still in it. And then again, once the games are over, then it becomes time to kind of analyze, who am I going to play next and who's injured and blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of management that happens all week long, which is why, at least at our house, it is a constant source of either frustration or elation, or at least conversation.
Well, there's also the podcasting.
Oh, yes.
I don't know if this is part of your family, but the Fantasy Footballers podcast is part of our family.
Oh, it is not at our
Oh
house.
my gosh. Count your blessings. And the guys are funny. Like
Oh, sure.
they're
You
funny.
have to be.
And they're a bunch of dads who used to do this podcast and now they've like turned it into a business, and this is what they do for a living, is talk about fantasy sport.
I mean,
And they all, they have all of these funny little segments and sound drops and all of that. But my husband has to make sure that he listens to each episode before he sets his lineup for the week, because they're going to tell you who to play and they predict a win, et cetera, et cetera. He has also used their fantasy grader, where you can upload your team roster and they will give you a grade A through F of how you drafted.
oh, that's kind of nice.
Yeah, this year he got an A plus, and one of the guys tweeted at him and said, "I didn't even know this software gave out an A plus. Are you in a 6-team league?" And he says, "No, this is a traditional 12-team league. I just really curated my trades."
Oh, wow. Is this one of the teams that our husbands are working together on that he got an A plus on?
They are against each other in this league.
Oh, oops.
Yeah.
Whatevs, man.
It's fine.
Whatever. I don't care.
This is the league that John's like, "I'm gonna win this year. I'm going to win this league. I have traded everything I have for next year, so I have to win this year." He has like traded away all of his trades. I mean, all of his draft picks for next year.
Oh,
And like,
then it's going to be a lot of negotiating in like July for this guy to start doing well next year. That's
Right.
amazing. To me, the thing that I like about all of this, like the math nerd in me, like gets really excited about it, right? Because it's all like earning potential, it's all statistics, and it's all like predictions, which is it to me, that's really interesting. However, it's in an area that I don't necessarily pay enough attention to really care that much about. Like I enjoy watching football, but I'm not one of these people that keeps all this statistical information
No.
in my head. It just doesn't make sense to me. And so I don't really get that into it. And that's really all this is. This is all stats. It's all predictions. And so I appreciate how it's a hobby for a lot of people. Like that's a really cool thing.
One thing I would close with is fantasy is a bad name for fantasy football, because it makes it sound very, very nerdy, very, very Dungeons and Dragons-esque,
Like LARPy.
like LARPy, right? So
Okay, I'm going to clarify this by saying, if you are a LARPer, more power to you, because I think it's awesome that you have something that you love that much that you need to have it be a part of your reality. Like to me, that's very cool.
and we have already said that dress up and costuming are
Is
my
a
forms
form of self-care for
So, like, I'm all about it.
right.
I'm not I last Sunday learned a new board game, okay? Like I have the nerd inside me. What I'm saying is my dad, who is a sports fanatic, like we're not even allowed to say the words Indianapolis and Colts in the same sentence, because they left Baltimore in the middle of the night and they took the trophy.
That wasn't cool. I do know that story, and that
Okay.
wasn't cool.
So my dad's like, fantasy sports. what is this? Like a 20-sided die for football? Like, no, it's not.
It's only fantasy because it was, if you had a fantasy team, if you had your ideal,
Right.
perfect make-believe team, that's where the name comes from. I'm sure
Right.
of it.
That is where the name comes from. So understand that when someone is talking about their fantasy team, they are talking about, if I could pick any players to build a football team from the entire NFL,
Here's who I would choose.
assuming that those are who are available after all my friends have also picked their players.
Right. Assuming that I have first round, like pick in every single round, then,
Yeah.
first pick in every round is what I meant to say. Yeah, no. So, it does make it sound that way. And there are some people who totally geek out over their team. And that's like, again, if that's what makes you happy, that's really cool. I think our purposes in having this conversation were just, here are some things that you will hear as your partner is talking to you about his or her fantasy team. Be prepared for that. And, you can survive this conversation if maybe you know a few things.
Right.
And you don't have to know a lot. You just have to have some working phrases, and little bit of working knowledge is really all you need. So hopefully this was helpful. We can go into more depth and we can give you guys a fantasy update if you need it. I don't imagine that you are going to struggle too much if you're someone who is like Jenny and I and only has a passing interest.
Right.
I think you'll be fine. You got this.
In the spring, we'll tell you about baseball. And fantasy baseball really makes me mad because you don't get any points for defense at all.
You don't get any points for what?
For defense.
Which you should, because fantastic catches and stuff like that should be
right.
a big
They don't
deal.
count for anything. And my favorite players on baseball are always outfielders, and they cannot score any points for your fantasy baseball team. Fantasy baseball points are based only on batting and pitching.
That's for next time. Jenny, thank you so much for giving us that working knowledge, that rundown. That at least helps me. I feel like there's so much that I kind of have picked up just from conversations with my husband, but there's plenty more that I needed to know, and I feel like you were helpful.
Oh,
So
you're
thank
welcome. What are you going to do about that?
How'd that go for you last year?
Yeah.
Did you beat him last year or no?
That's good. That's good. That's good. All right. Well, you know what I'm going to say now. Make good choices.
Use your gift cards. Bye.
Bye.
Hey friends, thanks for listening to the CK and GK podcast. Find us at CK and GK podcast on Instagram and Twitter, and rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, or anywhere else that you pod. See you next time.